This story took place when I was 8 years old, and my mother and I had just moved into a new house. I loved that house until I realized there was something strange. That something was our neighbor. We'll call him Steve. Steve was an older man, probably in his early 60s at the time. He was very socially awkward, so his wife had to do the talking for him when they were around. It wasn't until months later, when my mum and I were returning home from dinner at around 8:30 p.m, that I noticed Steve had ran to his window to watch us. He saw the headlights of my mum's car pull up to our house. He swung open his front door and pretended to take out the trash, although trash night had already passed. He just stood there watching my mum and I as we ran to the front door, and my mum was frantically trying to open it. We turned around to look and see where he was, and he just gave us the creepiest smile and wave I've ever seen. Later that night, around midnight, I heard a strange sound outside of my bedroom window. I kept on hearing it and I just couldn't figure out what it was. And then suddenly I realized that the sound was rocks hitting my window. I decided to go have a look outside my window and see what was going on. And outside my window was Steve. He was throwing the rocks. The next night, my mum and I went to the mall. It was roughly around 8 p.m. I felt as though we were being followed, so I whipped my head around and there he was. Steve was following us. He noticed us noticing him, so he decided to ditch his trolley, and then he quickly ran and hid behind a rack of clothes. Not long after this, my mum and I drove home, and once again there was Steve not far behind us. Luckily, that was all that happened that night. I couldn't call the police as there was no solid evidence, so one day I had had enough. I was in a room by a big sliding glass door, and Steve had come around my backyard and was just standing there and staring at me. I got really angry, yelled at him, and I locked my door and shut the curtains. When I peeked out the curtain, he was right up against the glass, and he was just smiling at me. I felt like I couldn't live comfortably in my own home, so shortly after this we decided to move, and luckily we are now safe. I pray I never run into Steve again.